After a successful liftoff just over 6 hours ago, the Artemis II crew are now orbiting the Earth and have been conducting tests on their spacecraft. Here's a recap. Technical issues before launch. A couple of technical issues in the lead-up made for a nervy couple of hours before launch. There were issues with both the flight termination system, which is designed to destroy the rocket if it goes off course, and a battery for the Launch Abort System, which would pull the crew capsule away from danger in case of an issue. It looked like takeoff could have been delayed. But NASA managed to resolve the issues by being quick on their feet, an official told the media later. One was fixed by using hardware from the previous Space Shuttle program. The roar of flames at liftoff. Launch was met with giddy euphoria among NASA employees, our science correspondent reports. You could hear the roar of the engines and cheers from the crowd as the rocket took off. The boosters were later seen separating from the rocket. We then had confirmation the astronauts had passed the Kármán line, entering space and Earth orbit. Epic views and an issue with the loo. The crew have been treated to epic views, one astronaut said, but it hasn't all been plain sailing. There was a short-lived comms issue, which meant ground control couldn't hear the astronauts, and, among other things, there was an issue with the toilet. That's since been fixed. While all the families and friends are certainly feeling a lot of relief after the successful launch, everyone is keenly aware that this is just the start of a very dangerous 10-day mission and a risky re-entry, Stacey Morgan says. She was at the launch supporting the Artemis II crew members' family and friends. Her husband, astronaut Andrew Morgan, was a NASA classmate of Reed Wiseman and Jeremy Hansen. Morgan adds, "There's relief and excitement, but also the reality of what lies ahead. After all, we're going to the moon and back." It appears that, after the problems reported earlier, the toilet is ready for use. Happy to report that toilet is go for use, Mission Control says. We do recommend letting the system get to operating speed before donating fluid. A little earlier, we heard that mission specialist Christina Koch had the happy job of troubleshooting the issue. It seems to have worked. "It's been a great day, guys, and we're going to try and get you to bed a little bit early," Mission Control says to the Artemis crew. There are a couple more operations to run through first, including troubleshooting the issue they've been having with the toilet. "I don't think it will take very long," Mission Control says. The astronauts' sleep will be divided into 2 slots. They are scheduled to get around 4 hours before waking to monitor something called the perigee rays burn. This will put Orion back in a stable orbit for the loop back towards Earth. After that, they are then scheduled to have another 4.5 hours of sleep. Devised by Christopher Kraft for the Mercury program of the early 1960s, the nerve center of U.S. space missions grew to become hives of activity by the time of the Apollo missions. Photos of white-shirted technicians frowning over cumbersome consoles became almost as iconic as the images of the Apollo 11 astronauts on the moon. Now, Artemis Mission Control looks very different to those of 50 years ago. The massive consoles have given way to sleek terminals and overhead lighting that are reminiscent of tech startup offices. But look behind the tech, and Mission Control now has the same job as half a century ago. The structure that Chris Kraft put together as the first flight director has really stood the test of time, says Fiona Antwiak, one of 9 flight directors assigned to the Artemis II mission. Before NASA commits Orion to the long burn that sends it away from Earth, the crew are spending hours quietly trying to break their spacecraft on purpose. They cycle computers through different modes, switch radios between ground stations and relay satellites, and deliberately move around the cabin to see how the life support system copes as carbon dioxide and humidity build up. Engineers also command small thruster firings and check the European-built service module responds exactly as the models predict. All of this is designed to answer the simple question, is the ship healthy enough to risk flying hundreds of thousands of kilometers from home with no quick way back? If any of these tests throws up something they don't understand, NASA will not hesitate to call off the translunar injection burn and use Orion's engine to bring the astronauts straight back to Earth.
NASA astronaut Stephen Bowen says one of the first things you notice in space is something simple: you are floating. Floating never gets old, and I actually sleep better in space than I do on Earth, he told me. Bowen has been an astronaut for more than 25 years and has taken part in multiple missions, including 10 spacewalks. On the space station, you strap yourself into a sleeping bag attached to the wall. You just float and sleep. There's no real sense of up or down. A typical day begins with breakfast and a check of the schedule. From there, Bowen says, it's work from start to finish. You're scheduled continuously from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep. That includes hours of exercise, scientific experiments, and maintaining the spacecraft. Even small things behave differently. Tears, for example, don't fall. They just stay in your eyes, he describes, as a crewmate once found it hard to stop laughing as the tears built up. For Bowen, spacewalks are among the most extraordinary parts of the job. You're holding on to the space station and the Earth is passing below you. The view is absolutely unbelievable. The Artemis II crew are already discovering that even a trip to the moon comes with very down-to-earth plumbing problems. According to flight controllers, sensors in Orion's waste management system, essentially the spacecraft's toilet and urine processing gear, have thrown up some readings they didn't expect, and engineers are now working with the astronauts to run extra checks and reconfigure the system. For now, Orion has plenty of backup options, from alternative collection bags to different ways of routing liquids, so this is more about comfort and long-term reliability than an immediate health risk. But with 10 days in deep space ahead, NASA wants to be absolutely sure the system is behaving before committing to the burn that will send the crew away from Earth, and they say they won't hesitate to cut the mission short if the problem worsens. As well as toilet trouble, the astronauts have discovered a few other niggles with their brand-new spacecraft. A valve linking two sets of water tanks was found closed when it should have been open, probably jostled by the violence of launch, and has had to be reset. Engineers have also seen a repeat of a minor electronics hiccup from Artemis I, where a component briefly tripped after a radiation hit before automatically recovering. None of these issues are classed as mission-threatening, but they underline why Artemis II is very much a test flight. The astronauts are currently putting the Orion capsule through its first proper maneuver in space. The capsule fires its small steering thrusters to drift a short distance away from the spent upper stage of the rocket, then slowly slides back in again, practicing what NASA calls proximity operations, controlled flying close to another object. This is designed to help perfect the techniques they'll eventually need for docking with a lunar lander once it's built, and flying as part of later Artemis missions. Throughout the maneuver, computers track the distance and closing speed between Orion and the upper stage, and the astronauts practice taking manual control using hand controllers in case the automated systems ever fail. Proving they can do this safely in low Earth orbit helps build confidence for future dockings around the moon. Artemis II is just the second step in a long and challenging journey. Eventually, NASA astronauts will touch down again on the moon more than half a century after the last Apollo mission left, but this time the intention is for them to stay. The Artemis program's long-term goal is to build a permanent settlement on the moon. All going to plan, astronauts will spend months in close proximity to a handful of colleagues on a dusty and airless moon base where nights can last up to 2 weeks. Dealing with all of that will require people with patience and discipline along with the technical skills. It's very difficult to select an astronaut because you're not looking for superhumans in any one domain, says Sergi Vaquer-Arau from the European Space Agency, which is part of the Artemis program. As we've been reporting, after liftoff, the Artemis II crew will be doing more than just sitting back and enjoying the view, although observation is an important part of their mission. Mission specialist Christina Koch has previously explained that the astronauts will be able to study the lunar surface in exquisite detail for a full 3 hours during the 10-day mission. There are other tasks too. In orbit, the astronauts test how the Orion spacecraft handles, manually flying the capsule to practice steering and lining up the spacecraft for future lunar landings. Then they'll head out to a point thousands of kilometers beyond the Moon to check Orion's life support, propulsion systems, power, and navigation. The astronauts will act as medical test subjects, sending back data and imagery from deep space. During a national address, U.S. President Donald Trump congratulates the team at NASA and our brave astronauts following the Artemis II launch. He calls the mission quite something, saying the rocket will travel further than any manned rocket has ever flown and very substantially passing the Moon. God bless those four, he says. It's been more than 2 hours since the roar of liftoff, and the astronauts have been enjoying the epic views, but they still have work to do. The spacecraft will spend the next 24 hours orbiting the Earth twice to test various systems. There has already been an issue with the toilet. Tasks include igniting the so-called RL-10